Good evening and welcome to TalkSports, our Saturday sports special. I'm Michael Bascom and coming to you live from Austin, Texas, and a belated program indeed because we had adjusted it to accommodate, the time adjustment and venue and whatever it is for this weekend's program. I greet you with the news that we have a very interesting program this evening. And I will introduce my guest in a moment. But just to let you know that our program will be coming from Austin, Texas for the next few weeks until sometime the end of November. Right. As it is now, that's how it is sometimes. 1 week we probably in Brooklyn, New York, then we in Myrtle Beach, Minneapolis, wherever it is, we will be. Yeah. So our program this weekend will deal will be a continuation from previous program, but we have a special guest on this weekend. Our guest is no stranger to sports in particular because he's a former national basketballer and currently the president of the Grenada National Basketball Association. But bigger than that, he holds the position of instructor of epidemiology at the St. George's University Department of Public Health and Preventative Medicine. And he has been explaining to the public a lot. And I think he has not gotten what I would say that level of, pardon me if I say respect and recognition, but I think he has been making a lot of sense from what I've heard initially. And then when I went back and checked, and that's why I invited Gerard St Cyr to be on our program because it has a lot to do with that topic. And the topic has to do also with a subject, I should say, to do with kids getting back to school. And when they get back to school, all about the recreation, physical education, all these things will be important matters to be looked at. And there has been a level of hesitancy for one part in terms of the vaccination in Grenada. And we'll hear also from Gerard St Cyr, his views on that, and quite a bit other we hope to speak about. And obviously the public will throw in their questions, their comments, and what have you. But let me use this opportunity to formally introduce Gerard St Cyr to the program. He has been waiting for quite a while, I think. Gerald, after you unmute your mic, I want to say good evening to you from, obviously, it has to be, a cool St. Andrew, a big parish to be exact. Good evening to you, Gerald.
Good evening, Michael, and just want to say I'm really happy to be on your program. I've been following your program recently. And I must congratulate you on the job that you're doing, promoting sports and important issues, bringing it to the public, and so that we keep updated on what's happening. I also want to say good evening to your viewership, those who are listening or looking on. I do hope that the program would be beneficial to you and you would enjoy it.
Okay, well, yes, and right away we hear that it's already a good topic. Thank you, Pat. No doubt, it has to be, and anything to do with the kids and the children and the young people. I think it's very important. But as an intro, Gerard, let's get a sense of your involvement, and I just say your involvement, but more or less in your profession as an instructor at St. George's University and School of Medicine in epidemiology. Gerard, to be honest, I think most people knew you as a basketballer, a national basketballer, avid basketballer, deeply involved in sports in terms of basketball. Talk about the whole transition.
Well, Michael, I've always loved sport, and as you get older, there must be a transition from being actively involved, like playing, into, I thought, to give back to the sport. So whether it's volunteer programs or in the administration of basketball, which I didn't see coming, but based on what was happening in Grenada over the for the past maybe 8 years prior to that, that came out of having to get basketball back on stream, and it's going to take a while. So sport is ingrained in my DNA. Where I lived and grew up in Rivulet Lane, it's really next door to Victoria Park. So my yard was a park. So I basically grew up living at the park, and sports was always an important part to me. Actually, when I was deciding on my choices for secondary school, interestingly enough, Bascom, I wanted to go to GBSS because of the sports program there.
Right.
And my mom wanted me to go to Presentation Brothers College because she thought that would have been the school of her choice, and I would have turned out to be the person she thought I should have, based on my potential. So having said that, I had to, eventually I conceded and went to Presentation Brothers College. So most of my love for sports was not necessarily known at Presentation Brothers College because we were not really known for, performing really well on that level in different sports. But I played a lot of football and basketball unknowingly to Presentation Brothers College. And so I eventually came on the scene, as you would know, by the time I got to IFE. But having gone to a school that emphasized on the importance of academics, I was able to create that blend to balance the sports with the academics. In fact, my success in the academia came as a result of my success in basketball, because I thought about the time I was putting into the sport, and if I was seeing that progression and improvement in sport, then if I put in that time in my academics, in my studies, then I should have seen the same result. That's exactly what I did. So by the time I got to IFE, I was creating that balance. I was already representing St. Andrews at the basketball, at national level. So it was having to balance doing the science subjects, math, chem, physics at A levels with sports. So I was known for my sporting ability, especially basketball. Most people didn't know that the balance with the academics was always there, and always had a great interest in science. So that would have, over the years, that would have transitioned into doing a Bachelor of Science in Biology. And then because of my love for helping individuals in medicine and public health, I eventually did a Master of Public Health at St. George's University. But that didn't stop there, because I'm always thinking of what am I good at, or what am I better at? So a Master in Public Health didn't necessarily give me a specific area that I loved. And eventually I was able to figure it out that epidemiology, which is the science of public health, and when you look at my background in the natural sciences and math, then it meshed really well, and it became a sort of a passion. And so I then pursued studies at the postgraduate level with the University of London in that area. And so as a result, I've been able to, I've been teaching epidemiology for the last 10, 11 years at the department, ensuring that students understand the basic concepts. So recently, the existing pandemic has sort of afforded the opportunity for me as an educator, as a teacher by nature. I saw the opportunity to be sharing credible information to the public, because epidemiology is a science, and there are many things that the person on the street doesn't understand. The terms that we use and the phrases that we're hearing now that we have a pandemic, in the midst of a pandemic. There are lots of misconceptions and misinformation being shared around. And so that is why recently I've been more vocal on social media, appearing on a few programs, just as to send out to give information that would help individuals understand better what's happening. I think that's very important, and so I do that just because of my love for teaching and sharing information.
Mm-hmm. Well, very interesting, and we have to talk a lot about that because the hesitancy, the fake news, how you have been able to battle that. I mean, using social media to battle a lot of the fake news that a lot of Grenadians have been consuming. I know it would have been a hard task, but just to get into a little personal things again, just to put things, because I know a lot of people might be saying, but yes, I've been hearing the name, but how can the relationship, and just within the last hour or two, I've been sharing that with you, that you basically related to some stardom, I should say. Apart from being a former national basketballer, if I may just say, and you probably can take it up from there. The retired Assistant Commissioner of Police, Trevor Modeste, you related to him, as well as Olympian Felicia George in Toronto, Canada. Just briefly, just tell us about the relationship, especially about these two, and there may be others,
Yes, well, the connections, as I explained to you, my dad initially was from St. George's, an area called Blogger Cottage, just around PVC area there. And so he would have started his life, young adult life, in St. George's area, worked at the Grenada Telephone Company. And as he moved upward in that company, he was then transferred to St. Andrews area. But by that time, he was already married and his wife had passed, and he had some kids in St. George's area. But when he moved up to the St. Andrews side, that's when he met my mom. And he had some kids, my brother and I, and together with a few others in St. Andrews area. But the relationship to Felicia George is that one of my dad's siblings, Paul George, is from River Road, right? He lived there, and you know him very well.
Yes.
And that's his daughter, so that's a connection there. So Felicia and I are related because her dad is my brother. And Paul and I has been very close. He's been living in Canada for a lot of years. And he's always shown that interest in keeping that family connections, as well as in interest in Grenada. So Felicia and I have that close connections here. Trevor Modeste is one of my, I would say, sporting icons that I looked up to, growing up in Grenville area, looking at the Patrick Simmons, the Trevor Modeste, the Livingston Nelson, Eugene Lickwish, Jericho Greenidge, all these athletes performing in the Eastern Games over the Easter weekend. As a child, I saw all these athletes performing, and Trevor was always an outstanding athlete in the field events. And my dad and my mom eventually shared with me that Trevor's dad was my dad's brother. So Trevor and I are cousins. And so once we got to know that, Trevor has always been, very open and friendly to me. And so there is this connection. I have family in St. George's area, and I'm from the St. Andrews area. So there is this connection here. And Felicia and Trevor, two sporting icons, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm the third one who has done some, at least have left an impact in sports in Grenada at different levels, and been thankful for it, because sports, as you know, Michael, contributes to the development of an individual in ways that other activities cannot, and it gives you skills that you can use for a lifetime. For me, sports helped with my self-confidence. It helped with my success in all areas. The success from basketball spilled over to other areas, because one can simply look at how successful they are in one area, look at what they're doing, and use that same blueprint to develop and improve other areas of their lives. And so I wasn't particularly interested in academics to excel so much. I was interested in just passing my exams. And that was good enough for me. But once I saw the basketball by the age of 19, been trying out for the national team, after doing well at the under 20 level, sort of indicated to me whilst I was in IFE that if I did put some more time into my academics, then I would be able to tap into my true potential. And that's what happened. So many times, sports gives us that avenue where we can build our self-confidence if we have a low self-esteem. And it helps you to grow in ways you build friendships that last for a lifetime from within your country, from other islands, from other countries. And these are relationships that last for a lifetime.
Mm-hmm. And a nice segue into what we want to discuss now has to do with, yes, sports, but are you concerned, Gerard, that with this pandemic, how it will affect sports, and not just the competitive sports, but recreational sports, physical education, especially among our young people?
Michael, I'm very concerned because you know what it is to be a young Grenadian growing up. Freedom, right? I mean, that's how we grew up. Being free, being able to be out on evenings, whether you live close to a playing field or in your yard, or you meet up with your friends from the neighborhood, and you learn to play different things. You may not excel to the point to represent your country, but it's part of your socialization in Grenada. You meet and you play, you express yourself, you form bonds. It's an avenue for you to release your extra energies and maybe some of the stresses that you may have from even as a child growing up. You may have different things that may be bothering you, and sports helps you to channel that energy, emotional energy into those areas. So I'm very concerned that the kids have not been able to be actively involved in recreational sports, and those who have the potential to excel, who would have looked forward to competing and to excel in, even to the point where they get an opportunity to represent Grenada and to possibly obtain a scholarship to move on to tertiary education. All these things have since been swept under the carpet. And so at the lowest level, the recreational aspect of it is vital. It's important for our development. Even as adults, being on lockdown on weekends affects you. You have to stay in for the 48 hours, and you have to find things that keep you going and keep your mind at ease, and not, especially if you're someone like me who likes to be moving, who likes to be out on the basketball court regularly, sometimes just sitting looking at the kids play. So just imagine the kids being locked down, not being able to have it on evenings, not having it within the school system for just about almost 2 to 3 years, and that is very disheartening to me, because I know what I would have experienced as a kid. Going to primary school, the fun that we had, just playing, just being free, free from academics. I mean, who wants to sit in a classroom for the entire day? Adults don't even want to do that. How much more kids? So just that aspect, that freedom to express yourself is very important to you as a child, and it is related to your development as well. And so kids who have a low self-esteem would continue to exist at that level, whereas recreational activities helps them to find themselves, helps them to believe in themselves some more, helps them to express themselves. And as a result, there's a overall development. So I'm not even talking about the school sports activities where you're competing. I'm just talking about the recreational activities. And that has been, disappearing over the last 3 years. And I'm very concerned about that.
Yeah. Well, it's a concern shared by so many, but part of it has to do, and I don't know if you agree with that, with the low level of vaccination in Grenada. And it has been a hard task, I believe, for the authorities in convincing Grenadians taking the vaccine. Earlier, you mentioned about being active on social media and posting information and these sort of things. Why you thought it was necessary for you to take it to social media? And, in some instances, I believe it had to do with fighting the fake news.
Yes, there were one or two reasons. One, having an inquiring mind, first of all, to get as much information, to be able to share, to talk about it. I felt that as a public health professional, and this is a public health issue, then it's my responsibility to contribute positively towards public health. And in this instance, the public health drive is to control the spread, first of all, and eventually to eliminate it if possible. And so I saw a few posts on Facebook that were, in my understanding of what was happening, I questioned it. And so it sort of drove me a bit to look for more information in addition to what I already knew. And I thought that in doing so, that information should not stay with me, because if, as a public health professional, as someone who is teaching epidemiology, I had to look for information, how much more the person who is not in the field. It means that they need much more information than I did to fully understand what was happening and to be able to make an informed decision. And what I found, Michael, is that vaccine hesitancy has been listed by WHO in 2019 as one of the top 10 challenges to public health as it relates to the control of infectious diseases. And I was not aware of that. And that sort of sent off an alarm. And so if WHO recognizes that, it means that they have been seeing over a period an increased resistance to accepting vaccines that has been accepted before, and that is prior to those vaccines that we have for the COVID-19. And so there is a challenge there that at baseline globally to the uptake of vaccines. Now, Grenada has a pretty good coverage, not pretty good, but very high coverage of vaccines as relates to the vaccines that are required of us to enter school at the age of 5, etc. Right? We have a very high coverage. In fact, it's considered to be one of the highest. But what we're seeing here, in this instance, is an increased resistance to accepting these vaccines, and there could be many reasons we can explore why this may be so. And I would want to explain simply so that your viewers can understand. Vaccines, in this instance, the vaccines for COVID-19 were rolled out in a much shorter space of time compared to previous vaccination programs that took many years to develop, tested, and to be rolled out. So that was one. Individuals did not fully trust that. Secondly, the new technology used in the Pfizer vaccine, and I think Moderna, is a technology that is different from what has been used before, whereas the AstraZeneca still uses the attenuated version of the pathogen. So it's like a dead or less virulent version of the actual virus being used to alert your immune system so that you get an immune response. And in the event that you get exposed to the actual pathogen, then your immune system is able to mount a response faster because it has memory of what the vaccine would have provided for it. The new technology, on the other hand, is using the blueprint, part of the blueprint of the virus, and is using the mRNA technology that takes it to the ribosomes in your cells. So it's not the dead version of the virus, it's a blueprint or part of the DNA. Now, individuals felt that once they heard DNA or blueprint, that was a scam that has been used to insert genes or genetic technology into our cells, and that cannot happen in that way. So the normal person who doesn't understand how the cell operates can easily believe that because it sounds like that. And so not trusting the technology, but that technology has been under research for 15 to 20 years. So it's a new technology because it's the first time it has been rolled out in a vaccine, because there wasn't an opportunity prior to this to use it. But it has been researched extensively, and the results has been alarmingly good. And so the mRNA technology uses the blueprint for the ribosomes to create the spike proteins that is similar or identical to what the virus will show when it gets into your body. And I'm just explaining simply so that your viewers will understand. So when it does that, when the ribosomes produces these proteins, that is a hat. I saw someone explain it as using a hat. So the hat identifies the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And as a result, your body is able to mount the response from that. So it has memory. And then if you get exposed to the actual pathogen, then your immune system is able to kick in much faster, because it takes you about 2 weeks to get a full immune system response in the event that you have a deadly virus as this one. And 2 weeks is just too long. And so individuals didn't trust that, because terms like nanotechnology, and when we hear nanotechnology, people thinking that they were trying to insert chips, microchips into our bodies, etc. But the nanotechnology came from the fact that they were using because nano means very small. They were using very small capsules, and in one instance they were using lipids, which is a fat, really. So very small fat molecules to encapsulate the blueprint from the virus, and inserted it when we got injected with the vaccine. That went in as that. So because you need to protect that in order for the mRNA to pick it up, because it really breaks up really easily. So individuals hearing that also felt that it was some form of genetic engineering, but genetic engineering is much more complicated than this. It involves going into your cell DNA and sniping out actual parts of your genome and inserting what you would like to reduce your risk of diseases, which is something that has been studied extensively now as well. But in this instance, it cannot be done through a vaccine. And so individuals misinterpreted those, and as a result felt that it's an added reason because there's a risk. So once individuals evaluated that the risk was too high for them, which could have been based on misinformation, they obviously would have resisted it. And a lot of misinformation together with incorrect interpretation of or lack of right information from what really happened would have contributed to that. With respect to the time within which they were able to roll out this vaccination to the entire world or globally, of course, individuals would be concerned about that. But in this instance, in where we had a pandemic that seemingly was reaping havoc in the developed world, and it was spreading across the globe, and so a lot more funds was poured into developing these vaccines, whereas in the past you'd have had to wait for the pharmaceutical companies and other funding agencies and convince them so that they can fund your vaccine research and development. But because of the existing environment globally in the midst of a pandemic and the impact it was having, a lot more funds was pushed into it, and gladly much more collaborations among the researchers, so that it could have been developed much faster because the technology was already ready. They were ready to use it. It's just that we needed an opportunity to use it, and that was the perfect opportunity to use it. But the technology itself has proven to be very, very successful. And we thought initially, so that was two main reasons I've explained to you. Initially, which is the third reason why there's a hesitancy. Initially, we thought that the vaccines would give you total immunity, because the other vaccines that we take as kids, we were told that we would be immune to those diseases. And as a kid, when I think in standard 2, which is grade 3, I think I had mumps. Kids today don't have mumps. They don't know what these diseases are. So vaccination programs would have been responsible for basically eradicating a lot of those diseases, right? But what we found recently, Michael, is that those vaccines that we took, some of them as kids, by the time you get to college age, your immunity was compromised. It started to drop. So most universities are now asking new students to take boosters, because they have been recognizing little pockets of outbreaks of individuals who were vaccinated against those diseases. So over time, although we thought that it was going to be full immunity, over time we started to find out that it was being compromised with time, and there needed to be a booster. In this instance, we thought initially that it was going to be full protection as well. That is why we started to use the term herd immunity. And herd immunity implies protection as a group when most people within our threshold or number of individuals are immune to the pathogen. And that could be as a result of exposure to the actual pathogen, you recover, so you become immune, or secondly, through vaccination programs. So herd immunity is when we have a larger percentage of our population immune, so the likelihood of an outbreak is greatly reduced. So that's what we thought. But then the virus started to mutate. And what we saw was that we were having breakthrough infections. In other words, individuals who were fully vaccinated were contracting the disease, the pathogen, and they were having symptoms, etc. And so initially, we said that there was if we vaccinate a certain number of individuals in the population, we would reach herd immunity, because we don't need to vaccinate everyone. But when the virus started to mutate, that went out the window. But what we recognized was that there was some protection, in that you were able to mount a response much faster in the event that you got exposed to the pathogen. So initially off the bat, if your body's going to mount an immune response much faster, then that greatly reduces your risk of severe illness, because it's going to start dealing with the virus before it proliferates to the point where it causes severe illness. And that's just basic science here. And so if you do not get to severe illness, then it is highly unlikely that you may die. So what we were saying is that the vaccine was reducing significantly the severity of disease and mortality among individuals who got vaccinated when compared to individuals who were not vaccinated. So there was a shift in what we thought the vaccine was going to accomplish. And so the 3 points that I've listed, Michael, you'd realize because of the nature of it, there was a lack of trust, because people didn't believe. Oops. What happened there?
No, you're there. You're there.
Oh, there? Okay. Yeah, all right. I thought it went for a while. Yeah. So sorry. So there was a lack of trust as a result of that. And when there is a lack of trust, individuals would not accept something like a vaccine, especially with the misinformation, the information that the anti-vaxxers are putting out there. I've been appalled at some of the things and videos that I've seen against the vaccines. A lot of them, I would say, is total rubbish. But if you cannot decipher the information, Michael, you're going to believe it. That's how convincing it can be. So that is why I felt that the hesitancy was so high in Grenada, and I felt that at least to put out some incredible information would have been helpful in one way or the other.
Okay. Well, we have some comments and questions there, so let me get it
yes.
to it now. 1 month before the Tokyo Olympics, Japan's vaccination rate was about 8% with community spread, worse than what currently exists in Grenada. Certainly, we can learn from the games and make the resumption of sporting activities highly possible in Grenada. COVID is not going anywhere. What are we waiting on? That is one there, and I think there's another one that is sort of related, if I may just read it. What measures can be put in place for sporting organizations to safely return to competitive sports, or should there be a hold on contact sports? What is the best method to roll out a bio bubble for sports to participate in international qualifying events? So some very interesting thing, and I want to get your comments on that.
Yes.
Starting first with the Japan Tokyo Games
And
scenario.
I am happy, Michael, that individual mentioned Japan and the Tokyo Olympic Games. Now, I would want to refer to the Japanese. And most of us would know that the Japanese are very disciplined individuals.
Yes.
And discipline plays a lot. It's a huge factor in how we successfully deal with this pandemic. And so if our behaviors largely determines how well we can deal with it. And so I would say our population lacks the discipline. And I'm not just speaking about the pandemic and behaviors to adhering to protocols. We have seen over the years a decrease in that area in many different facets of our society. And that is, I would believe, is fundamental in our approach. Now, if we are unable to achieve that discipline is not something that we can achieve in a short space of time, because it has to do with your way of thinking and how do you see that benefiting you as an individual and then as a population. And so when in one of the programs I appeared on, I spoke about education as a Grenadian, and I'm not referring to degrees here. I'm talking about education that allows a Grenadian citizen to think independently, to be able to critically analyze information, and if he or she can, to be able to go to credible sources to do so. I'm talking about a citizen who can do an assessment of risk versus benefits and make a decision based on your assessment using certain guiding principles. And if you are not comfortable with, or you lack the knowledge, then you would be able to seek that from credible sources as well. And I'm talking a lot about empowerment here as individuals and then as a population. We largely are, I'm sad to say, but I say it with no apologies, we are very gullible, and we seem to just ingest stuff that comes on social media, and we are very reactive in our approach to all of the things that we do. And so if we are unable to address that, if we cannot, as individual citizens, if we do not understand the importance of adhering to the protocols strictly at all times, if we do not understand that in my evaluation of risk versus benefits, I should be able to make a decision on to take the vaccine or not to take. If I decide not to take the vaccines, what are my risks? What do I need to lower my risk? Because some individuals would not take the vaccine, and that we have to accept. But we do hope that individuals over time get to the point where they understand that we have a population that has 33% pre-diabetic or diabetes. That's 1 in every 3 individuals. We have a population that rates very high in cancer incidence in the Caribbean. I think is in the first 3. We have a population that is increasingly having obese kids and young adults, teens. We have a population where we're seeing more and more of asthma and these other diseases related to respiratory challenges. And so I could name a long list of underlying conditions that are ever present in our population. And that again speaks to our approaches to health, how we eat, the lifestyles that we live, and what is our view of health in Grenada. And all these things are being reflected now. Individuals are reacting and pointing fingers at the health authorities and many other aspects. But we need to look beyond. We need to look before that. We need to understand that the culture that we have here has not focused on healthy habits, has not focused on improving your quality of life by doing simple things that would ensure our immune system functions at the optimal level. We do not have a system that educates the individual on how to manage the disease effectively. We do not have individuals who can receive that those directives and adhere to it. We still have individuals who present very late with many of the outcomes. Even with some of the deaths that we've had, individuals presented to the hospitals very late. And there's so much that you can do when this happens. And so it's a whole culture on how we approach, how do we see health, and how do we define health in Grenada. And this has exposed us because we have a nation that is practicing a lot of unhealthy habits. And if we continue to do that, then we'll continue to be exposed because the approach is not, we should not be concerned about our health and immune system when we have a pandemic. This is something that we should be concerned about as an individual every living day. It's our defense system. It's your body's defense system, and you've been given the responsibility to take care of it. And so all those things, we could relate to many different things, Michael, because we could relate to the poverty levels in Grenada. We could relate to unemployment. We could relate to so many different things. And this pandemic has exposed and will expose even more because it will not get better. More people have lost their jobs. There are more unemployment individuals. More individuals would fall below the poverty line. And we know the relationship with poverty and diseases. We know the relationship between stress and diseases. And so we need a very clinical dissection of what we would want to do in the future, how we're going to change what we are doing, Michael. Because this is just maybe, I think this is a warning to us that we need to pay more attention to a lot of different things and not just get carried away with the drama of social media and think that's reality, because what's reality is what's happening here. And if we fully assess what has happened here, it has shown us, one, we already know that we do not have the best healthcare system. So if we do not have the best healthcare system, we need to take responsibility for our health before we get sick. And we need to start thinking about how do we better educate and make provisions for individuals who cannot, who doesn't understand fully what it is to take care of yourself. We need to educate, re-educate, educate, and re-educate. This is so very big, Michael, that I cannot express accurately how this has exposed us as a country. There are many things that we need to resit. Even the education, we spoke about the recreation for the kids. I mean, do we have a plan when the kids return to school on how we are going to approach the activities that they will be engaged? Would we put them straight back into the classroom doing, having been exposed to all different subjects with limited recreational activities? How are we going to help them to express themselves based on the experience and the impact that COVID has had on them? And all these are things that the kids are at home now. And my son, who is 12, he has about 16 to 18 subjects that he has to do. He's in Form 1, and he's confined to home. I mean, how is he dealing with that? Having to do remote learning in front of a computer, that he's just learning to deal with the Zoom classes and how comfortable he is and those things. All those are issues. What about the kids who are not very comfortable speaking into a camera and those things? So all those things we have to think about in the future, because it may happen again. We may have a second wave, a third wave, and all those things we need to start catering for. In other words, there should be a contingency plan from the Ministry of Education. How do we get the kids back to function? I mean, do we want them to write the CPA next year? What's the importance of CPA? Do we need to have the CPA? I mean, how does it make a student better compared to the common entrance exams we had before? Can we think about alternative ways to ensure that these kids are developing in ways that we'd want them to? Are we addressing the mental issues that these kids have as a result of COVID-19 and being restricted so much, not being able to express themselves? Because we know kids express themselves genuinely. I mean, and they've been locked down and they basically are at home now. And so it means that there are things that are building up there. They may not say, but we might see them acting it out when school resumes. So these are concerns that I have about all this.
Mm-hmm. Well, Leon, Francis, yes, other countries open back and running, but as indicated by Gerard, they are disciplined enough. You know, the population is disciplined enough. But Gerald, the other thing that was mentioned had to do with what is the best method to roll out a bio bubble for sports, and consider that come early 2022, January of 2022, Grenada should be hosting England in cricket. However, as the Prime Minister explained just a few days ago, I was on a Zoom with the National Budget Consultation, and there was this concern that if there's another way, for example, that could be in jeopardy as well. So, you know, and I saw this question comes up there as to the best method to roll out a bio bubble for sports in Grenada.
You know, we have to, first of all, Michael, we have to sit down and think about what is it that we're trying to achieve. Are we trying, I mean, at that, would we have control on the spread? I believe based on the data that we're seeing that it's slowing down a bit. But that doesn't mean it ends there. If for one reason we think that because it's slowing down, that's a reason that gives us the go ahead or the green light to relax our attention on the importance of adhering to the protocols, like wearing your mask properly, sanitizing your hands, refraining from touching your eyes on your face during the day, you know, respecting the social distancing and those things. If we think for one reason, because the numbers are slowing down, that's a prescription for us to go back to our old ways, then we'll just see a resurgence again. So then, you know, I would say, first of all, are we at the point where the Grenadian understands that this is not a temporary fix? The protocols that we are adhering to shouldn't be temporary. It's something that we must send out to the population. This is something that we're going to have to be doing for a while. And if we understand that, then we can talk about how do we increase the vaccination uptake as in addition to adhering to the protocols. And if we see that happening, then I believe that we can have a bubble, but then look at the facilities that we have. The National Stadium, the Grenada National Stadium, is the only enclosed area that we can successfully monitor if we have individuals and we want them to respect social distancing. It's the only venue that we can say, let's see if we could enforce that. All our playing fields are open. Individuals can walk in and out. How are we going to monitor that? So I would say to have a bubble in Grenada is very challenging. If we have an activity at the National Stadium, then we can put things in place to have a bubble where the individuals who we are going to be participating in the activities, so the actual sporting discipline, then we can think about, do we have a village for them where we create that scenario where no one comes in, no one goes out? But I mean, that's something that we have to think about. Do we have the resources to do that? So frankly speaking, I don't think we're even thinking about that yet, because we are so concerned about controlling the spread and reducing mortality and mobility that we have not had a chance to seriously think about that, because that's going to demand of us a lot more planning. A bubble is not something easy that we can effectively roll out if we do not plan properly. And that's not one of our strong areas in Grenada. We seem not to be able to sit and plan properly by having the appropriate stakeholders on board. So, Michael, I think it's possible, but I think it's difficult for us at this point to even think about having a bubble. But I believe that we can start rolling out eventually, having little activities, sporting activities, and trying to limit the number of patrons. For example, I know GFA season could not finish. Can we start getting the footballers back playing eventually, whether it's they use like closed fields and the Grenville Park, the stadium, I think 4 past year, and see how we can eventually start rolling these things back. But for the sports who use open venues, I mean, that's very difficult. Would we have security? How do we control that? We've had to cancel an under 23 national basketball tournament, which should have started last weekend. So not can't, but postpone until further notice. So, this is a period of uncertainty, but it shouldn't prevent us from thinking ahead on how are we going to roll out the sports stage by stage or at different levels before we get back to normal functioning, because it wouldn't make much sense just saying, okay, let's start back playing sport again. I think we could do it in stages to have certain sports based on the venues and roll it out slowly. And it's not a time to think about, well, your sport could play and my sport can play. It's a time for us to think about what's best for our nation and how do we get it back out in stages. But again, as I said, to have a bubble, we'd have to think about continue to sensitizing individuals on protocols and underlying, highlighting the importance of it. We'd have to continue to champion the cause for those individuals who are hesitant to the vaccine, to see how much of them we can win over to take the vaccine. And saying because it has shown benefit, and the more as our vaccine uptake percentage increases, it increases your likelihood to roll out activities like that, because it's just a ripple effect. The more people you have protected, the easier it would be for you to roll out your activities. So those things I think are related to it, and I don't believe we are close to that yet. At the last figure I saw, we were like just about 25,000 fully vaccinated. That's less than 25% of the population, but I know we have kids who are, we can't give the vaccine, but just doing a rough average, let's say it's just about 20%, and that's very low. Although, Michael, there are many individuals who are of the belief that, the larger percentage of individuals who catch COVID would survive, and that's, once you're healthy, they survive. So like 90%, I think. But the thing is, we do not know who has underlying conditions, because so much individuals have underlying conditions in Grenada that we are unaware of. We're not a population that do our annual health checks. We have not been cultured in that way. So I could be speaking to you now and I think I'm feeling good, I'm healthy, but if I have not done my health checks over the last year or 6 months, then I would not know the actual status.
The saying that you go to the doctor only when you're feeling sick, right?
Yeah, as I said, Michael, we are people who think about health when we get sick, but that should not be. The thinking today is that based on the lifestyle diseases, because it's based on most of the diseases, the leading causes of diseases globally are lifestyle diseases, is the type of life that we're living. So it means that we have a certain level of responsibility towards ourselves to help to reduce the risk for them. And that is what it is. So it's not like there are other exposures or behaviors that we can engage in. But if we understand that we are empowered enough to make those changes, then we can move forward. We can How many individuals, do their regular health checks? Breast cancer is on the rise, prostate cancer, colon cancer, all the cancers. Like 5 years ago, one of my friends who is a doctor said he was diagnosing women who were in their early 20s with stage 3 and stage 4 breast cancer. I mean, this is like unheard of, and it just tells you that there are many things happening that we are aware of. And I believe that has contributed a lot to the high case fatality, or the mortality due to COVID over the past 4 weeks, because there are many underlying conditions that we just are not aware of, and we're not very proactive when it comes to health. We stay at home, we drink bush, we do self-medication. If my cousin had the same complaint, I go by him to get the same medication if he has some leftovers. And that's the kind of things that we still practice in Grenada. I mean, it's I have to mention, because I'm speaking the reality. The thinking here is not of a proactive one. People don't take that seriously. They don't go to the doctor to find out sooner. They go later. And that is a big challenge here.
Let me just get a comment. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Mr. St Cyr, for breaking this down in the simplest way so people can understand the risks from Dan Williams. And are you saying too that, and you spoke about the mortality COVID related in that context, that in many of the cases, and what you would have seen or heard in terms of some of the cases, that some of those deaths could have been avoided if we had taken probably the high road. We had the opportunity. Speaking to Dr. Marshall on this program some time ago, and he was saying that there was this level of complacency. We were watching for quite a while what was happening outside there, and the saying goes that God is a Grenadian, and people are just very complacent. But you share that view that
yes, and let me yes, Michael, and just allow me to explain. In my my understanding, we were doing, prior to August, right? We had one case and one death, actually. So I think 9 cases, and they were all imported. So we were catching them. We were doing pretty good, and I think that brought a false sense of security. We felt that COVID wasn't coming. We were just seeing this on television. We were seeing the deaths, Italy, Spain, US, of how COVID was reaping havoc. And so when that happens to you as an individual and as a population, that sort of gives you a ticket to not pay much attention to it, because if we understood that it was coming and the level of education, how much we sensitize the population, and the rate at which we continue to pound and to create that environment, because it should have been an environment in Grenada where we were developing our discipline for when it came, but that didn't happen. So COVID-19 caught us with our socks down. We were not prepared as a nation, because we felt that the authorities were catching it. So when it got in, people started to blame the government. And I want to say clearly here, Michael, that I do believe that a reduction in the quarantine from 2 weeks to 2 days was a fundamental error. But that was compounded by the fact that our people did not believe that the COVID-19 was coming. And so as a result, our behaviors would have compounded and contributed to the spread, the rapid spread of the disease within our population. And so we should not be at this point blaming, but we should be at this point thinking about our individual responsibility. Michael, when I speak about individual responsibility, I have a responsibility to myself to ensure that I lower my risk and I try as much as I can to prevent infection. But that doesn't stop there. There are people, there are loved ones that I meet, I see every day, that I interact with. There's my mom, who is an elderly person that I interact with. She doesn't leave the house, basically. So if I would, for one moment, that mask I can't breathe so well. So I'm talking to my friend. My friend decides he ain't wearing his mask either. And he is infectious and he sneezes or coughs or whatever in my presence, and he doesn't follow protocol to prevent the infected droplets. And somehow that gets into my system. That's all it needs. I get infected. And I decide when I visit my mom, this is my mom, so I feeling good, I ain't wearing my mask. And the same thing happens. And just like that, our responsibility is to ourselves, to the loved ones, and to every person that we interact with. And if every Grenadian thinks of it in that way, the virus cannot continue to spread, because in order for the virus to spread, it must find a susceptible host. It must leave an infectious individual. And that's why it gets infectious, because it must go from host to host, because eventually the body or your immune system deals with it. So it dies. So whatever virus remains in the body dies. So it must move, in order for it to survive, it must move from the host to a susceptible individual. Now, if you're wearing your mask properly, if you're vaccinated, then it makes it almost impossible for you to contract it. And I make it sound simple, but it's discipline again. It comes back to discipline. If we are disciplined in our behaviors, we would see the numbers dropping. There are individuals, Michael, who received a positive test and decided that they're not positive. So they decided, they tested they're positive, but they decided not positive and continue to behave normally. So if 10 individuals does that, the Delta variant is so infectious that each person that's infected and becomes infectious can potentially infect 6 to 8 individuals. So if 10 individuals decide they're not bothering and they're infectious, they can infect potentially a maximum of 60 to 80 individuals. And that 60 to 80 can infect another 60 to 80 times 6. So you see how quickly it spreads exponentially, because this virus is highly infectious. It has improved. In fact, in its mutation, it has improved. And it has become more infectious because it wants to survive. And it means that it's smart. You see, we have smartphones, smart cars, smart everything. So the virus has become very smart. It has figured out how to continue surviving, because if we are not disciplined, then it's going to spread. And I say to individuals that it's an individual. I say to people it's an individual responsibility. I would still see individuals not wearing the mask. I would still see individuals speaking very close to it, to others, and they're not wearing a mask, and that seemed to be like nothing. So it's discipline. And I did say, when we look at Japan didn't even want the Olympics. The population didn't want it, because they felt it was coming. people would have brought it in. But they're very, very highly disciplined population. That doesn't come overnight. That has to be ingrained in your DNA. That has to be taught from home, in schools, in church. That has to be taught everywhere. We have to be. Michael, I'm sure you remember when you were growing up. Your parents were not the only parents.
Nah.
The entire community,
yeah.
an adult, you dare not, do anything stupid in the presence of an adult. They would have dealt with you, and guaranteed when you reach home, your parents knew already. So if we do not have that discipline, I mean, there's no way we're going back, but I'm just pointing these things out. People point fingers and jump all around, talking. The fact remains that we're not a disciplined country. And if we're not disciplined in our behaviors, the protocols require discipline.
Yeah. Let me get some comments here. Costa Wellington, very good program. We do have a long one from Roger. Jerry is right. We have got to plan. It appears, however, we are not doing much of it. We cannot be crippled by the fact that there's no physical school settings, but that doesn't mean no physical exercise. How about the students submitting video recordings of physical exercises? All this to say that the plan we required has to be effected as we build the bridge. This pandemic demands that we apply ourselves outside the box. That is if we even got a box. And Simon Ross is saying, is it far-fetched to think that an annual bill of health should be presented to schools and workplaces as a requirement just to ensure we are doing annual checkups?
Well, let me speak to Roger's comment. Roger, and I know Roger very well, and that's a very good point because I sat and thought about it, and currently, the kids are doing the remote learning, and there is physical education on the curriculum. So the same point Roger thought about it. So I said to myself, so this can be translated now. The physical education class can translate itself into encouraging the kids and having the kids do activities that would get them active again. It would not be as fun as when they have their friends with them, but it is a start. And so that form of innovation is needed. And as Roger said, I don't think we need a box because a box tends to cramp our freedom of thought and expression to find innovative ways of doing things. If we continue to think in the box, then we'll just be doing a class, online class, because it is a requirement. And it shouldn't be just a requirement now. It should be, Michael, these classes should be to enhance the kids, to get them back into functioning normally. But it's a class, you're not in school. So you have to now try to tailor your classes to activities that would get the kids feeling comfortable, get them expressing themselves. So it shouldn't be just focusing on covering content as relates to your syllabi that has been prescribed for you, but it should be getting the kids to express themselves, getting the kids to be active again, getting them to be as comfortable. Whilst we cannot replace the classroom, we hope as educators we can think beyond just the online learning as having a 35-minute class, but to engage the kids in ways that gets them feeling comfortable and easing some of the restrictions that they have. Because I'm telling you, if I have to sit, for an entire day and do 4 online sessions, Zoom classes, or 5 Zoom classes as an adult, that would take a lot out of me. So imagine the 12-year-old, the 13-year-olds who have to sit, they're already restricted to their home environment and have to sit and, be in those class sessions. It's an additional stressor to them. It is an additional stressor to them. And it's going to take a while before they get comfortable. Regarding the health comment related to health, that's a tricky one. I think it's something that could be explored, and but again, the political will is very important. It starts from the top, and I always say that as a people, we have lost our power by the way we think. We still believe that power lies with the politicians, when we should understand that the politicians, we owe them respect, but we have to hold them accountable. And if we do not hold them accountable, then we are the ones that would 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 not benefit from it, because we seem to think, Michael, that Grenada doesn't belong to us anymore. And if we look at it in that way, and we give the country to individuals who have put up themselves to positions to run the affairs of the country, then we ought to hold them accountable. And that is something that we do not have here. We still believe that when we have an election, we give the country away for the individuals in charge to run, and there is no accountability, because we do not understand, Michael. We do not understand that we can determine, if we can determine the direction of the country goes, if we fully understand our responsibility as citizens. Some of the things that we accept here would not be accepted in other countries. Some of the things that we jump for here would not, other nations would not jump for them. And so when I spoke about education levels, that's what I'm talking about. We do not understand what it means to be a citizen of Grenada. We do not understand our rights, and those things. So when we do not inform ourselves, when we lack knowledge, we will perish. And that's a fact. When you lack knowledge, you perish because you don't know. So you accept anything. If the wind blows here, you go with it. The wind blows back, you go with it. Whichever direction the wind blows, you go with it, because there is no grounding. And if we do not have grounding, then we cannot stand up. If we don't believe in anything, then we can't stand for anything. And these are basic principles that we continue to lose, that continue to be eroded over time, within our culture here. And that in itself is underlying factors on the direction and how things have gone, whether it's politically or whether it's, and I'm not bashing anyone, I'm just saying here that if Grenadians understand what it is to be a citizen of Grenada, then we would start thinking differently. But then again, who educates us? When you look at our education system and how it struggles, kids are doing 16 and 17 subjects in Form 1. I mean, does that make much sense? And what is it do we want to teach these kids when you leave in secondary school? In addition to your CXC subjects, what is it you should know? What is it should you know as a Grenadian in addition to your 14 CXC subjects? Has anyone asked that question?
Yeah, I think it should be common sense, should be one too, but that's quite a lot. But talking about the political will, which you mentioned, and not that but basically your thoughts on whether you think government intentions in terms of for sports and physical education post-pandemic, because as a sports administrator yourself, as president of the GNBA, National Basketball Association, certainly you will want to have an idea what are the intentions of government for sports and physical education post-pandemic. And I say that in the context that I was privy to be part of the budget consultation a few days ago. And interestingly, there was not a focus group for sports. And I say sports, physical education, that aspect of it, because I consider it to be very, very important. And I raised the issue, and the reaction was that probably in the budget, blah, 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 and I see it again as probably just a line item in the budget. But now the importance of sports and physical education in terms of the way forward. Post-pandemic, yes, health, education, etc., but I see sports and physical education by extension being very crucial, very critical, considering all the points you lay down there in terms of the kids, the well-being, and all the underlying conditions and thing, and being disciplined enough, and all these things. I think sports and physical education are crucial for that. If you have a crystal ball, and if you have to see what you think should be government's priorities or intentions regarding sports, not that it is a priority, but what you think should be the priority when it comes to sports and physical education post-pandemic.
I believe that moving forward, well, just let me back up a bit. The fact that there wasn't a part of the consultation that focused on physical activity and sports should tell you everything. So I wouldn't comment on that. In order for that to happen, we must have a plan. And if there is no plan, if it's not included in the consultation, then that means there is no plan for it. So that's a different discussion. There are some major areas that we have to look at moving forward. And I am concerned not just about the physical or the recreational activities, because that is very important, and that is tied into what I would mention, the mental health of our kids and even our adults in Grenada. There should have been some plan moving forward on how, as a nation, we are going to address the mental issues that would start showing up. In fact, how are we going to start providing avenues for individuals to de-stress, for individuals to express themselves, for us to form some avenue for support. Because you cannot say, Michael, that the Grenadian people are not hurting, and they're not hurting badly, because we could speak for very long, extended periods on that. Just from the COVID-19 experience on mortality, etc., because that everyone in Grenada knows someone who have died recently, because it's just like we know each other so well that someone just has to see my vehicle coming and they know the number. So wherever I go, people know the number, because that's how well we know each other. It's a small community, it's 105,000, I think. So yes, with a crystal ball, I believe that there should have been some consultation on how do we move forward using the different sporting discipline stakeholders, the Olympic Committee as a resource, and the other stakeholders, so the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Sports, Ministry of Finance, and the sporting disciplines. We all have sporting organizations, national associations, and the Olympic Committee is one of the independent bodies that we are affiliated to as well. And so consultation along those lines would have, because we have Michael, we have brilliant minds in Grenada. I mean, we have brilliant minds here, but individuals must be included. Not all of us would take the forefront. We have to find opportunities for individuals who can contribute to that. So I'm saying the consultation would have now come out of the consultation, we would have come out with a plan on how are we going to address. So mental health, recreational activities of the kids and adults. I'm talking about as a nation here. And that can be driven for the kids, can be driven through the schools, because we know they're going to get back to school, so we're going to be capturing most of the kids on a daily basis. They're in school, right? So that's very easy. We cannot say afternoon programs, because that can be kind of a challenge in terms of the getting the logistics, etc., and kids have to get home. So the school setting is an important setting where we can capture the kids. We cannot just focus on content and covering content for subject areas now. We are in the midst of a pandemic. We have had 2 years of a different experience that we are accustomed to. And not everyone would be able to cope with that. Not everyone has the coping strategies to be able to deal with those things. And the kids they're a vulnerable group. The elderly people are a vulnerable group. The individuals who are predisposed to anxiety, attacks, and depression are vulnerable groups as well. Are we going to ignore these? So again, looking ahead, we can use the associations and the schools, Ministry of Education to focus on the kids. The associations can look at how we can get community groups, etc. Having little activities to get people a bit more active as we roll back into some form of normalcy. So that can be done because the tournaments and the competitions for those who are at the competitive level will start running again. So I mean that's like a given. The organizations are going to start having for example, once things go back to some form of normalcy, we're going to have under 23. We're going to have a national tournament. We're thinking of having a ladies tournament as well. We're going to have a national team, getting prepared for, the next set of round of qualifications. So at the competitive level, I think these would all fall back in place. But outside of that, then that's my concern. What happens to those individuals who do not take part in competitive sports, who just want to have a little bit of freedom to express themselves, to exercise, etc. And so the consultation, I cannot, in my view, give a prescription or a blueprint for it because it's going to take many minds coming together with different ideas on how are we going to approach it. I can speak generally, and I'm saying generally, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Finance should, because we can capture the kids. So consult it together with the associations to bring in other ideas on how this can be done, because the focus should not just be on academia now. We should not just be thinking you have the kids in class for the week doing 18 subjects. That is just not appropriate for this time. We should have a contingency plan on how do we get the kids back to that point where we can eventually see after 6 months or a year, we can reintroduce them to all the different subjects. But our focus should be on mental health. It should be on recreational activities, so your physical activity, development, etc. It should be on socializing skills, etc., managing different emotions and those things. And that's what we want to get done, because we cannot treat individuals now as if it's normal. We cannot treat individuals as if they're normal. People are walking around looking normal, but there are many things that have been internalized and need to be expressed. And if we do not provide avenues for that, if the government doesn't understand that, if the government thinks it's just business as usual, so we can just say, all right, we're going to have online classes and then eventually roll back our kids back to school normal, that just doesn't make any sense to me, because this is not normal time. We have not had a normal experience over the past 2 years. And so we cannot just cut it and say, all right, it has ended, let's go back to some form. We should have a contingency plan on how do we get the kids back, how do we get them back to the normal levels of functioning within the restrictions that may exist still, because the COVID-19 is not going anywhere. It's going to be here. We're going to have to adjust our lives permanently to that experience. And so it's not like we're looking to go back to where we were, but we must now find the best quality of life within this experience as we move forward. And that's very important. So myself, as one mind, is unable to give a comprehensive view of what should happen. Generally, I could say, this is what we should do. And I believe that the Ministry of Education, together with the Ministry of Health, Finance, with the sporting organizations, so the associations, see how we can help support little activities within the schools for those who may want to play a little have a little competition, if it's for a day, etc. within the schools. How can we do that? But outside of that, what about the parents and the adults? What about the adult population? What about the high-risk groups that I mentioned? The elderly, those individuals who are predisposed to have anxiety, depression. What about these individuals? I mean, what about the individuals who lost their jobs, who are currently unemployed? So there are many things so that's why I'm saying the consultation should have included that, and recreational activities is one of the areas we can channel that. That's only one of the areas.
Okay. A couple of comments here coming in. Leon is saying it's sad to say, but we are going back to all things normal from the head, and for all leaders in all sectors. God is a Grenadian. Sad for us. Roger is saying the rest of the world are having their meets, and we must find ways to have our sports men and women train and be ready. That's Roger Augustine is saying that. Stephen Isaac, I must say that's a very informative presentation, and thanks, Mr. St Cyr, for all this information. It helped me a lot day by day. And Karen Batiste is saying, I'm looking forward to hearing about the initiatives and programs for basketball in Grenada in a post-pandemic era. I know you said earlier that the Basketball Association had to postpone I think it's the under 23 tournament.
Yes, it's under 23. We already have sponsorship for it. It was supposed to start last week, but we had to call it off about a month ago because of what was happening. The under 23, the national men's tournament, the intersected 3-on-3. We also want to revive the women's basketball. The intersected 3-on-3 we held like 3 years ago, one off, but because of the pandemic we couldn't continue. So that's something we're going to come back with. The intersected 3-on-3 basketball. We have the under 23 that's going to run national tournament, the men's national tournament that's going to run. So once we have that freedom to have these competitions, then it comes out, because we have sponsorship already for the under 23. Then we seek sponsorship for the men's national tournament. And we usually have businesses on board for the intersected 3-on-3. So, but the restrictions and the fact that we cannot have the tournaments have kept us back. We have waiting as well. Last year we were supposed to have a referees clinic to get not referees but coaches certified at FIBA level 1 last year, but we had to cancel. We are again still waiting because we already have funding for that. Currently we only have 3 certified FIBA coaches on island. Coach Naka, who is basically at the end of his coaching stint. I mean, he would want to be at least easing off some of his responsibilities. Coach Benjamin at the ministry and myself, and that's only 3 certified coaches. So if a national team has to go out, it's only one of the 3 of us that can go once we're going to participate in the FIBA tournament, because it's a requirement that we have a FIBA certified coach. So one of the objectives was to get 15 additional certified coaches last year, but in the midst of the outbreak we had to shut it down, and we're just waiting now on just the freedom again to have the guy come in to do the certification over a week. So we are waiting, and there's going to be a coaches online session organized again by FIBA sometime soon. There's a referees one coming up that we usually send out information for the referees and coaches, etc., to participate in the online versions of what is provided at the time. So yes, activities once we have that freedom again to run the tournaments. We've been meeting monthly to keep the planning going, waiting for when we have the freedom to roll them out again.
Mm-hmm. And considering it as a contact sport, it means that you have to wait and follow the protocols and do all that is necessary. And waiting means waiting from the all clear from, I think, the Ministry of Health, right?
Yes.
Right. And I think there was someone added, George Peters added social development also, I think, when you were naming.
Yeah, I'm going to miss that one, yes.
The ministries. Social development is an important one in that aspect. Social development, education, health, sports, finance, you consider them to be key sectors in the rebuilding process, because it's almost a rebuilding process.
Yes, Michael, it has to be. Mm-hmm. We cannot operate as if we're going to just there's an end of the pandemic restrictions and then we return to normal. We cannot operate like that. It is a continuum. So just as how we got into the pandemic and protocols, we need to phase ourselves back into it. And that requires, based on the impact of this experience, a lot of people have been affected mentally. And so the mental health is important. And we know that. We know mental health is a key in everything that we do. It affects every single thing. And so if we do not address that seriously, it means that we are not very, we are not very serious about getting back to where we were in terms of normal functioning. Because if someone is not healthy mentally, there's no way they can function.
But in the general scope of things, are you really concerned that, and I know as an epidemiologist, that's one aspect of it, but you also a sports administrator and a fanatic of sports, not just basketball, but you also deeply involved in sports in general. Are you concerned that if we do not address some of these issues as you raised, and even the mental health issue, all these others, that even if we try to focus on sports and the rebuilding of sports, that we may be faced with a number of challenges as well?
Yes, I am concerned because, Michael, prior to the pandemic experience, I mean, I'm sure you've been following a lot of the activities of some of the young men in Grenada and how difference of opinions and arguments and so on most of them would have resulted in sometimes in lacerations, using cutlasses, etc., and those things, and it shows it is a reflection of how well we manage our emotions, and that has been a concern prior to the COVID-19 experience, the pandemic. And so with additional stressors now, so let's put let's pour into those individuals who are unable to manage their emotions, additional stressors. So what do you think is going to happen? We're going to have a lot more flare-ups. We're going to have a lot more aggressive reactions. We're going to see it. People they're going to get to the point eventually where they cannot hold it down anymore. And so the last drop is what's going to maybe break the camel's back. And so if we do not provide avenues for individuals to release or to get rid of it before the cups get full, then it is going to spill over eventually. And so prior to the pandemic, I was concerned of the trends that I was seeing. So now, in addition to the experience over the last 2 years, it means that it is a volcano that is slowly building. And sometimes we would say, well, we are surprised at how someone reacted, but a lot of the times it's something that has been building over time. And if that person doesn't find an avenue or doesn't know how to manage their emotions, it's very easy for an individual to get to the point where they would engage in an activity that they would regret after. And I'm sure if you speak to a lot of the young men who would have been involved in some of the activities, some of them, like they don't even believe they did it. So it's like you get to that point where you trip, you execute, and when you return to some form of normal emotional levels, you did I do that? And so if we do not provide the avenues for it, and I'm saying that there must be we must be more vocal on that. Those of us who are in leadership positions, those of us who are aware of those underlying factors that could continue to create a negative impact on our society, need to be more vocal about it. We need to step forward. More people need to step forward. More persons need to step forward. There are many trained counselors and psychologists in Grenada. These people need to step forward. We need the services of these individuals as together to be able to help. And so the authorities must engage. We must have a plan on how are we going to deal with it. There must be an avenue for individuals to release some form of stress.
Mm-hmm. Well, yep. Important enough. Anger management, all these sort of things. Kwesi Bertrand, thank you very much, Mr. St Cyr. Very informative and stimulating conversation. Cheers to you, sir, my former master. Chem and chemistry, I think, for master of chemistry
I'm
and
math teacher.
math
Yeah,
teacher. Wow.
Kwasi.
Right.
Kwasi was one of my top chem students in secondary school.
Okay.
Oh.
Roger Duncan is saying, no better time to bring the sports policy to reality. That's something I may want you to speak on. We have another 25 minutes to go with there. Salisha Philip is saying, agreed. I was saying, why not allow exercise time during the no movement weekend? Why not allow? Yeah. Saying why not allow exercise time during the no movement weekend? Salisha, that may be probably a little probably self-discipline, as you said, personal responsibility, do it, do something at home.
Yeah, I do understand, but I do understand Salisha, Philip, I know Salisha as well. I do understand her point there, and I believe that individuals, some individuals would have done some exercising around their homes and communities, even though it's a no movement weekend. Those who really can't do it or the exercise. But we have to understand the context within which the government made certain recommendations, and I believe that they were hard pressed to put a halt to the rate at which things were going, and in doing that, would have had a little bit of oversight here and there. And so individuals, if this weekend lockdown continues, individuals must start thinking about getting in the exercise during the week, and maybe just a lighter session at home during the weekend, because we do not want to encourage individuals to go out based on the restrictions that have been placed on us. It's difficult because to be inside here for the entire 2 days is difficult for me, Michael. I like to be outside.
Yeah.
I'm a sports fanatic. I would just go and sit down on the basketball court and look at the kids play. On Saturdays, we run a volunteer program for kids 6 to 16, but we cannot continue to have it. So, so these are things that I enjoy doing, being outside. And so I do understand how individuals feel. I'm just saying that during the week, I hope that eventually you'd have a little bit of release, that during the week you can get in some exercise, so that you would not feel as stressed. Because when you exercise, it releases your stress. You're in a better mood, you sleep better, you eat better. It controls your weight, and weight is related to so many the outcomes, and so we cannot emphasize the importance of exercise. And so either there is again, and it continues to build the mental pressure and stress, and if the government says there is an exercise period during the weekend, I think some individuals would take advantage of that, and I believe that was the thinking. So just try to restrict everything, and I hope that this will soon discontinue so that we have a bit more freedom. But again, Michael, discipline of our population is, I really hope that people could, we could just see the need for us to adhere to the protocols. The faster we do this, the quicker we get to the high level of discipline, the faster we come out of this restriction. And once there is a significant reduction in the number of cases that we identify daily, and obviously the mortality is going to go down as a result, we're going to be fine. We're going to be able to function within our restrictions, but we would have some more movement. I did mention on a program before, Michael, that the number of cases is going to go down, because for every 1,000 cases we expected to see 15 deaths. So if the cases start going down, then the deaths are going to stand. Already we start seeing that. But if we use that as an excuse to revert to our behaviors prior to that, then we may just see a spike again, because it can happen. So it's largely dependent on our behaviors. It's largely dependent on how responsible we are, not just to ourselves, but to those individuals we come into contact with, to those our loved ones, ensuring that we look out for them, not just for ourselves, and not just think that we do not have it. Because I could have tested last week and received a negative result, but that is, the test would give you your status at that particular point of testing. Between last week to today, I could have been infected. So that doesn't give me the right, because I have a negative test result, to not wear a mask or not sanitize my hands not respect social distancing. So individuals need to understand that test result is not it is not a sentence for the rest of the year or the rest of COVID-19 experience. If you get a negative test result, it is a measure of your exposure at that point in time. It means that the virus is not in your body, or it may be in your body and it just has not proliferated to the point where the test could pick it up. So all those are variations of a negative test. And these are things that we have to be aware of. And that information needs to go to the public. We need to be pounding that regularly for us to understand. It's been a sad experience for me seeing how many elderly people we've lost. We know, Michael, Michael, the value of the elderly people to our culture, to
certainly,
our community, and to the things they pass on to us.
Yes, yeah.
Every time we lose an elderly person, we're losing a library of information. And so it's been a sad experience for me seeing how much of these individuals we've lost within a short space of time. And
under the circumstances,
yes, because I'm sure in most instances it was not their fault. The pathogen was brought to them because most of these individuals basically stay at home, venture to the yard or maybe to a shop that is close by within the community. They don't do much traveling. And so when we're losing individuals like that, it impacts you in ways that you never thought it could have, because I may not have known these people, but every time I see an elderly person on the death news, I feel that we've lost some valuable bit of information in terms of what they could have contributed, how much the impact they have on the family. Having a grandmother and alive and those things, going to visit your grandmother, visit your mom and those things. These are experiences that we value in Grenada. And when we lose individuals like that, we're losing important parts of our communities.
All right. Let me get some comments. Franklin Sween is saying, first of the budget consultation, there are others to come. Why not develop a program for sport and have government involved? Well, you may know something that I know, Franklin, but I'm speaking because I participated in the budget consultation and I specifically asked, and that's why I raised it. So you probably know something more than I knew, but I'm telling you what I was told because I asked the question during the budget consultation. Roger Augustine is saying, then move the Friday curfew to 7 p.m. and keep the Saturday and Sunday all-day curfew as is. And while we're saying that, I saw a comment somewhere on social media saying, road well brisk for this no movement Saturday/Sunday week, meaning that again, and it comes back to your point about being disciplined, the whole discipline aspect of it, Jerry. And Roger Augustine also said mental fatigue is a serious issue, and kudos to any employer or employers rather who are finding ways to help their employees release their tensions and ease their minds. Earlier I put great program from Lorna Bain, and I just want to say good evening to Lorna Bain somewhere in Canada, my old-time teacher since Form 1. So that is 20-something plus years ago. Lorna Bain, Form 1, Form 2 at the GBSS.
Well, Michael, you know that sports within the schools has always been an important part of our development. You went to GBSS, I went to PBC, and I'm sure our paths would have crossed because of basketball. The relationship that you develop. And I have to, there has always been a rivalry between Presentation Brothers College and GBSS. And whilst GBSS has always been, the school that have excelled in sports compared to Presentation Brothers College, we always felt as PVC boys that when we met GBSS, we were up against the best, and we had to give our best. So despite the outcome, it brought out the best. And some of the lasting relationships that I have, in addition to my colleagues from Presentation College, some of the GBSS past students, I've had some lifelong relationships and friendships with them as a result of that. And so despite the fact that we were rivals, just in competing with and against each other, I've been able to, sometimes laugh at it. When GBSS came to our basketball court in PBC, my first basketball game for the school, and GBSS came and they defeated us on our own court. And I look back now and laugh at, the response. I literally lied down on the court and cried after the game. But those things, just that, managing your emotions, after a loss, those experiences teach you a lot. How do I deal with when I lose against a team that I really don't want to lose? And what do I do? What can I do next time to better my chances of winning? And so when we take all these things away from kids, when we take, whether it's at the lower level, whether they're just playing a little game of cricket in the backyard of the school or playing field, or they're just, exercising, playing a little bit of small goal or whatever they're doing, it's still some form of competition. And it's still like they're socializing, they're laughing, they may argue a bit, they learn to manage themselves. And those things, that's very important for kids' development. And if they don't have that, they would grow up missing an important part or process that they should have gone through that we had. And what would they pass on, because they would have missed it. And so if they miss it, then it's difficult for them to even pass it on to their kids when the time comes around.
Mm-hmm. Another one is, Karen, it's very refreshing to hear about the basketball activities plan. Very important question. How do we address the issue of establishing a consistent and competitive men's national team that keep them prepared for regional and international competitions?
That's a very good question. Michael, in 2018, we were able to send out the first national team after 20 years. When I was elected as president in 2015 or 2016, somewhere around there, 2016, I think, one of my main objectives was to get a national team going out to our the regional tournaments and start to say at the regional level now things have changed so much. We do not have a Windward Islands competition, which is what we used to have before, for the senior national team, and then we used to have the OECS, and then we had CARICOM. So when I played for the national team, you had those levels of basketball. You had the Windward Islands, you had the OECS, you had the CARICOM at one point in time, and now we have just qualifiers every 2 years. And so what happens within the reality? So 2018, we sent out the national team to Suriname. And interestingly enough, we found out when we got into office, because funding is always an issue. So we found out, of the possible funding that was available through the Olympic Committee. And that was there ever since. And since I know myself playing basketball, the national team has always had challenges in finding monies to travel. And I don't blame them. They just didn't know it was there. And so we found that out. And in 2018, we were able to send out a national team to the pre-qualifiers for the Caribbean islands and Jamaica and Suriname, etc. In Suriname, and we were able to place 5th after 20 years. We were able to still place 5th. And if we had won the last game where we were for position against St. Vincent, we did beat them previously, but they defeated us, and then we would have come 4th. Which is not bad after 20 years. And we were able to pull in, I think, six or seven players that were in the US, together with another 6 or 7 local players, because I have the opinion and the philosophy that we should not fill an entire team with foreign players, because that would inhibit development of our local players. And so we created a balance to do that. Now, we were supposed to go back in 2020 last year, but that the COVID would have come. So we have to wait again until maybe 2022, which I think they would have adjusted the cycles for the pre-qualifiers. So once that the funding, we are now aware of where the funding is and how to get it through the Olympic Committee. Currently, we have, prior to the restrictions, we have a group of 15 under 23 players that we are training, like elite players 3 times a week. We have had funding for that, and these players have come from throughout the island. So we have 15 and 3 females, 18 players in all, that train 3 times a week on Carnage Court, preparing them to ensure that their basketball continues to development. We have about 2 or 3 of them that are earmarked for for scholarships to the US, but we must continue to prepare them to get them past the SAT exams, etc. These kids are under a program where they receive a stipend monthly. After training, the Ministry of Sports has supported and agreed to provide transportation, so they do not have to find their own transportation to get home. They get a stipend, and at the end of training sessions, they have transportation that will take them to their homes. That would continue. That program would continue, where we'll continue to have young players in that elite program from year to year, and as once we have opportunities for them for scholarships to junior colleges in the States, then they would go off. Excuse me. So things are happening despite the restrictions in terms of resources. But as an executive, Michael, we found that there are many opportunities through the Olympic Committee for funding, for a lot of programs, for grassroots programs, etc., that we're going to continue to tap into. And once the proposal, because we've gone through training to writing proposals for those programs, and the Olympic Committee has been very receptive, and we have built a really good relationship with them. So now we have opportunities for more programs in basketball to ensure that the kids get more engaged once we have the restrictions removed.
Okay, and quite a lot has been said regarding the consultation or lack thereof, etc., etc. But don't you think, as Roger Duncan is initiating there, that it's probably the best time for us to also talk about a sports policy and a sports policy in reality? Again, in the post-pandemic era, we need to be thinking, as he says, outside of the box.
Yes, Michael, and I agree with that. In reality, because we've spoken about sports policies, and we've done many things. We've had consultations, we've had processes where it was developed, and then they don't hear anything about it, and there just seem to be a lot of talk around the development of sports, and I say that with no apologies. Rather than having the political will and having someone in charge of that is strong enough to make it happen. We've just seen a fabricated approach to it, where something is done and there's no sustainability. Then the Minister of Sports is changed, and it just falls through the cracks. So there's no continuity on what a previous Minister of Sports may have tried to do or may have been working on. And when we have a new person appointed, then it just seems so. So there's no agenda, there's no policy, and when we do not have policy, there's no direction. And so each Minister of Sports does what he or she thinks should be done. If we have a guiding policy on what should be done, how it should be done, then it would be very easy for us to accomplish some of the things that we are talking about. And so when we just talk, and there is no action because there is no guiding policy, there is no continuity, then we're just not making any sense. And we cannot just talk sports development. We have to live that. Sports is an activity that is seen. Sports is not an activity that we talk about. The media talk about sports. The spectators talk about sports. But sports in itself is an action. It's something that happens. So if we're talking about sports development, we need to see activities that contribute to the development. So, we've just been spinning top in mud and going around the bush with that. We've just been talking sports development. And I say that with no apologies.
Mm-hmm. Well said, Mr. St Cyr. But turning for the last few minutes we have there remaining, obviously, as an epidemiologist.
So back to the other half.
Yeah, I would say that. By the way, are you the only one in Grenada? Are you?
No, definitely not.
Okay.
We have in our department we have 2 or 3 other individuals. Not Grenadians. No, not Grenadians. I'm the only Grenadian who works in the department, but I'm sure the Ministry of Health. I'm not sure who functions in that capacity there. I knew prior to Dr. Antoine's retirement, he used to function as the epidemiologist there, but I'm not sure who functions there now. I know Dr. Charles, who is the CMO, has a little bit of experience in that aspect, in that area, but again, I'm not sure if he can be, seen as an epidemiologist, because you have to go through a certain level of training to think as an epidemiologist, you see. And so that has been one of my criticisms of the approach of the Ministry of Health. Most of the team that you see in consultations are individuals who have been trained first as clinical doctors. So a clinical doctor thinks differently from an epidemiologist. And so the approaches that are used are largely from the perspective of clinical doctors. And so, having different stakeholders and professionals on your team allows you to get a wider perspective of how we should deal with different aspects. Things like individuals who are trained in health communication would be able to help us with the messages that we send out to the population. How do we send it out? Epidemiologists would be able to help us design simple surveys and studies to capture the barriers that exist to the vaccine hesitancy. And as a result, we can tailor programs and interventions to remove those barriers so we could improve the uptake of vaccines in Grenada. So all those things have been, some of those things have been lacking. And I don't point finger at them. I just said that there has been a little bit of short-sightedness in the beginning, and not to think about the holistic approach as it relates to the COVID-19.
Mm-hmm. Probably this may be an opportunity, or probably some may have seen it as an opportunity with this pandemic for those who are on the fence in terms of a career, that as an epidemiologist, that is something that they may be thinking. Parents may be excited about it and saying, hey, their kids probably is something that they can consider as well. You will encourage them to as well.
Yeah, it's not a well-known area in public health in Grenada. I'll just share some of my experiences. Well, one in particular, in the past, when I was asked what do I teach at St. George's University, I used to be very hesitant. Initially, I used to just say public health, because when I told people I teach epidemiology, you're teaching about the skin, because there's epidermis, right?
Yeah.
That deals with the skin. So it's not a well-known term, and even more so profession. It's one that for me it comes naturally. There are many challenges in learning the subject. The course of training that I took was largely online, and when I say online, the material is sent to you and you have to teach yourself. So it's a challenge when you have an experience like that to get through it, to learn the work. But in the end, you benefit from it. But there, of course, you can go to any one of the top universities. We have online programs that you can go to do a master's degree in epidemiology or public health with specialization in epidemiology or biostatistics. We lack those professionals in Grenada and the Caribbean. It's like people who are trained in those areas tend not to work for very long in the Caribbean because of the lack of opportunities and remuneration as well. They're needed in more developed countries and would tend to benefit a lot more from it. So I've been lucky to be employed with the St. George's University, and I value that experience and that I've had with them. It has been a very professional one, and what I say to any parent who has a kid that has the mind for not just challenges, but to be able to read between the lines and to be able to interpret and have that analytic mind. That's the word I was looking for. Analytic mind, which generally comes through science, right? So a student who has a natural tendency to do well in science, observation, analysis, interpretation, a lot of it that's what epidemiology is about, because I'm basically teaching my students how to design studies so that we can identify the risk factors for diseases, and so that eventually when we study so that we can influence the practice of public health and medicine. So the results of our study are supposed to influence how we do things. So we call it evidence-based practice of public health. In medicine, evidence-based medicine. So your practice is informed by the science. And so it's a science. So someone who has a natural knack for, interpreting stuff and dealing with some figures and the analytic mind sort of becomes easy for you, even though there may be challenging topics. So individuals, we do not have enough professionals in those lines because we do not have a culture in the Caribbean of research. And epidemiologists, basically, they're interested in teaching about research, doing research, and helping to spread that sort of a research culture that we have, because we believe that everything could be explained through research. We could actually unravel the challenges on how we could identify the risk factors, because we think about the different types of bias. It thinks about the things that will affect your study. And so when an individual speaks to me now, I sort of expect them to mean what they say, because we're so specific in that area of study. If you tell me, Michael, to read the thing day, which is local language in Grenada, right? I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about now, because epidemiology teaches you to think so specific,
right,
that I want to hear what thing you're talking about. Or if you tell me the shop is down by the road down, so I'm going to ask you, I need some more specific directions. What's the color of the shop? Do you have any landmarks that I could look for before I get to the shop? Is there a vehicle that is usually parked by what's the vehicle number? That's how, it kind of teaches you to develop that keen eye for things, differences, similarities, and those things.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I want to thank you very much, Jerry. It has been entertaining and enthralling 2 hours. And
can you believe that, Michael? 2 hours.
Yeah, I know. And for the comments from all the folks, from based on their comments, I thought it was very informative, and I want to thank you. I told you that I thought you were deep into that, and it's so unbelievable that so much of the misinformation that have been consumed by so many Grenadians over the past few months, that it's sort of mind-boggling,
Yes,
but I want to
is.
thank you for what you have been doing, and I thank you again for accepting the invitation, even though on short notice, and I appreciate it. Yeah.
Michael, thanks, man. I've always been, a sports fanatic, as you said. I'm now deeply engrossed in sports and my profession. I love teaching, and I teach epidemiology, so it has become like second nature to me. Your program, I have started following recently, so I've listened to a few of your recent programs, and I do admire what you're doing. I could see over the years how you've transitioned and you've kept up with the evolution of media. And I respect that, because in these times where things evolve so quickly, we speak about evolution, and Charles Darwin spoke about survival of the fittest, and some people seem to just think it of macro evolution, where we have coming from cells to monkeys to man. I mean, I don't believe in that, but evolution has to do with a change. And so when you're able to take your profession and change with the time as it requires you to survive and to create an impact in your field, I always say kudos to anyone who can do that, because that requires certain level of insight into what you're doing and how you can do it and the impact that you can have. So hats off to you, Michael.
All right. Thank you very much once again, Jerry, and all the best. Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks, Michael. Bye-bye.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Okay, thank you very much. Folks, that's Gerard St Cyr, who was basically giving us his take. He's live in Big Parish, in Grenada, St Andrew to be exact. And he's instructor of epidemiology at the St. George's University School of Medicine. And he's also, by the way, the president of the Grenada National Basketball Association. So he was wearing 2 hats on the program. He spoke about basketball as well, the sport of basketball, and interestingly, about the challenges faced by young people in particular, but the students who are hopefully returning to school in the very near future, and all about the social interaction, the sports involvement, and all these things, the lack thereof of physical education. We also touched on the issue of the lack of a consultation, I should say, because I asked a question during the recent national budget consultation about why sports and physical education not a focus group, bearing in mind, and Jerry covered it well as well, all that it will be required in when we return to some level of normalcy. Handling all these things is not just about the health and not just about education and all these things, but physical education, sports, not necessarily competitive sports, but some form of recreational activity is very important, and Jerry touched on that as well. I want to thank you very much, folks, and remember, as I indicated from the start of the program, that for the next few weeks our program will be coming from Austin in Texas, where I'm actually based now, and until revert to New York. Don't get the impression that I have relocated, Yeah. So thank you very much, folks, for being part of the program this week. And as indicated, the program was held at this time just to accommodate some logistics. Hopefully, we revert to our usual time slot of 8 p.m. on Thursday and 1 p.m. on Saturday. But we'll let you know during the course of things how it's going. So I want to thank you for being part of the program this weekend, and the invitation is yours to join us on Thursday evening for another in our Talk Sports program. Until then, you have a pleasant weekend, and looking forward to seeing you on Thursday. Thank you very much.